Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Small Business Strong Rethinking the Revenue Stack webinar. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amber Haskell, and I'm the President and Executive Director of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and I have the pleasure of overseeing our Small Business Strong initiative. At the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce Foundation, we are dedicated to supporting all small businesses across the Commonwealth through multiple channels, including our Small Business Strong webinar series. First and foremost, we would like to thank Blue Cross Blue Shield for their partnership and support with today's webinar and their overall continuing support to help small businesses across Massachusetts grow and thrive. And I should specifically say Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. Make sure I get the right one who's supporting us today. I would also like to thank Oak Lane LLC for partnering with us for today's presentation and for sharing this really great content. Before I introduce today's speakers, I just have a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the Chamber's YouTube page and through the Chamber Foundation's social media sites shortly after the presentation. For those of you who are joining us live, please submit your questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A feature on the right-hand side of your screen, making sure to send to all panelists. We'll also have a few polls throughout today's webinar. Hope you'll participate. You can also send any questions you have to foundation@bostonchamber.com. I will be on at the end of the webinar to put as many of these questions as possible to the team. And now for today's speakers. First, we have Meena Sharma, Strategic Advisor with Oak Lane. Meena is a strategist and collaborator with Oak Lane, bringing nearly 15 years of experience in finance, operations, and revenue growth. She partners with organizations to uncover hidden revenue opportunities, strengthen financial models, and design systems for sustainable scale. Her client work includes leading national initiatives such as Alpha's annual convention, where her restructured sponsorship strategy generated over $3 million in new revenue within 90 days. At Oak Lane, Meena applies her expertise in financial strategy, systems design, and process optimization to help organizations align revenue goals with measurable business outcomes. She is also building long-term wealth through a real estate portfolio and small business acquisition strategy, bringing both operational rigor and long-term growth mindset to her work. Meena holds a Master's of Science in Taxation from Suffolk University's Sawyer Business School and is a licensed real estate agent. Welcome, Meena, and thank you for joining us today. And then today's second presenter is Reggie Williams, CEO and founder of Oak Lane LLC. Reggie is the founder and CEO of Oak Lane, a strategy and communications consultancy that helps executives and mission-driven organizations design sustainable revenue systems and scale with clarity. With more than a decade of experience in business advertising, impact investing, and public policy, he has guided leaders throughout growth challenges and partnered with organizations including the City of Boston, United Way of Massachusetts Bay, the Equity Fund, Ares Corporation, and Innovate at BU. Through Oak Lane's proprietary Hour framework, Reggie equips leaders with practical tools to pressure test ideas, unlock new revenue pathways, and align strategy with execution. He is a Forbes, BLK, and official Black Wall Street Founders Club member, and previously served as a lecturer and faculty advisor at Tufts University's Derby Entrepreneurship Center, teaching innovation and venture design. Reggie is pursuing his doctorate at NYU's Steinhardt and holds a master's in public policy from Tufts. Reggie, thank you for being with us today. And with that, I will pass it over to the Oak Lane team.
Amber, thank you so much for that warm introduction. And thank you again to our funders, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, for making this workshop possible. And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We're really excited to be here with you today and to get started. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone, Mina, can you see my screen?
Sure can.
Great. All right. So here we are today to talk about rethinking the revenue stack. So we're here to talk about building smarter, sustainable growth for small business owners across Greater New England. All right. There we go. So, a little bit about us. As you heard from Amber, my name is Reggie Williams. I am the son of a master cosmetologist and hair salon owner, Donna Chaplin, here in Boston, and her business, Epiphany Hair Care Studio, has been open since the Menino administration. When we think about how businesses have been able to sustain and to pivot, given everything that's taken place in the past 5 to 10 years with the pandemic, with the recession, there are a lot of things that come into play where we don't often have the opportunity in real time to pressure test and come up with new solutions on how we're working to solve these challenges. One of the things I'd always like to say is that you can't give a haircut or a wash and set virtually. So how do folks do this in a remote fashion? How do we, incorporate social distancing and being able to keep our businesses afloat? That's a part of where this conversation came from, and I'm really excited to be here with my partner and co-conspirator Mina to share a little bit more about her experience and her work and her journey.
Thank you, Reggie, Amber, Blue Cross, and Chamber of Commerce, and for all of you guys that are spending your lunch hour with us to talk about revenue. My name is Mina Sharma. You guys got my lengthy bio. But the best way that I can introduce myself is second gen entrepreneur, real estate agent, revenue strategist. I love all three things. I come from a family that has owned businesses. My parents were in the convenience store business for many years. They still are. And some of the things that I've learned just being around that environment that I get to share with you guys is super exciting for me as we talk about revenue growth, pivoting, when to let go, when to think of something new. These are all such difficult decisions as an entrepreneur you take. Sometimes you have a community and sometimes you don't. So I love that we have spaces like this where we can talk about things that I've learned growing up that I get to pass on and share with you all. And hopefully you can share it with someone else, and make the entrepreneurial journey a little bit more community oriented and also kind of learn from one another. So I'm excited to be here, to share with you guys, to learn from you guys, and however we can support.
All right. So, what you'll learn today. So, we're going to be covering the basics of revenue diversification. So, thinking about how you can really stratify and think about revenue differently. We're going to talk about revenue strategy and operations overall. So, giving you a really firm definition of what that looks like and how you can apply that to your business, depending on your industry and your practice and your business model. We're going to go over expense strategy. So, thinking about how to spend smarter, cut where you can, and how you can really turn those savings into profit. And then lastly, talk about supplier inclusion ecosystems and how you can tap into these different resources that you have through partners like the Chamber of Commerce and others to be successful with your business efforts. All right.
Well, go for it. We're both excited for the icebreakers. You can't tell. We've broken lots of ice as we get to know each other, and talk about this stuff. I'll try not to be cheesy, but I don't think I can help it. So we'd love to know more about you guys and learn a little bit more. So you'll see a poll that pops up of what industry you're in. Be as specific as you can because learning where you guys are, what type of work that you do would be super helpful. And then your primary source of revenue, whether that's a single customer, you have grants, you have contracts that you have signed over years, whatever that primary source is, we'd love to know more. You can share as much as you want. There's 250 characters, I believe, so lots of space there to get detailed. But it'll help us pivot and guide this conversation a little bit more strategically. So we'll give you guys a second to answer that. Yeah.
And I think we'll give it just another minute.
It was extending the second for a little bit longer. It was an Indian second. I gave you guys a few extra.
Okay. All right. So we see that the poll is closed. So 100% are small business. Is that correct? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Well, while we pull these answers up, we will get started just kind of going a little bit into the strategic case for revenue diversification. So, what is revenue diversification? So, when you think about your revenue, you want to think about your revenue on a continuum, right? So, we're not just talking about one source of income, we're talking about all of the different types of money that are coming into your organization, whether you're selling goods or services, whether you're selling actual products, whether you have a membership model. So, just thinking about how your revenue is actually uh, assembled and how you're able to strategize about which levers you need to pull, especially moments like in 2025, we're experiencing a recession, a bit of economic activity and downturn. How can you make sure that you're not over reliant on one particular source of revenue? Because where you have over reliance, you have true risk. And as business owners, as business leaders, we want to mitigate as much risk as possible to make sure that we can keep ourselves afloat and that we can keep serving our customers and our clients and our communities well. Um, Next, we want to talk about the diversification because why? Diversification equals resilience. So when I think about something like, excuse me, when I think about marathons, for example. Marathons aren't sprints, right? You want to think about how you're running a race and that you have enough energy and gas to get all the way through those 26.2 miles. When we're thinking about multiple revenue streams, you want to have something that's working for your startup phase, you want to have something that's working for your established business phase, and you want to have something that's thinking about your growth and your longevity phase. So being able to think through and navigate this when you have one source that might decline, when the gas starts to get a low, let's say on contracts, you might be able to increase memberships. If, when you want to think about in terms of the continuity of your services over time, you want to think about other ways in the market where you can really innovate and be successful in navigating that ebb and flow by having that diversification of your revenue. And that also really ties into how we reach market demand. So when we think about the market, think about 2025 services, right? When we think about how companies like Netflix came and really, took Blockbuster out of the market. How do we innovate? Thinking also similarly to Redbox, when we could actually go and pick up physical DVDs. What happened to Redbox in today's market? They still may exist, but we might not see them as much because we know that we have so many streaming platforms and access to it. Those are large organizations, but as a small business owner, small business is big business, and how you do business in your communities and how you keep closing those feedback loops with your customers and making sure that as you're thinking about your revenue strategy, you're able to think about growth from a place of sustainability. You want to think about what your entrance plan is to being a business owner, what your growth plan looks like, and what your exit plan looks like. You want to make sure that your value proposition is front and center. So your unique value proposition, meaning like what is your, how do you present your work, your good, your service, your product in a way that beats out everyone else in the market? There's enough room in the market for us all, but how are you positioning your value so that you can make sure that you are not only aligned with the demand for it in the market, but you have opportunities to scale? That's where growth comes. And okay.
Perfect. I wasn't sure if I could do this example. This is one of my favorite examples. So when we think about revenue, we think about diversification. You want to pivot, you want to do everything, you want to do it all. And I'm one of those people that likes to do everything. But then I always remember Cheesecake Factory. Absolutely no shade to Cheesecake Factory. It is one of the places where you will go with 50 different people. Everyone can find something. But sometimes that is actually very overwhelming and stressful to be able to do that. And so for me, it's the Cheesecake Factory example is there's everything. They have to maintain everything. Everything has to be of quality. Everything has to be available at all times. You can't have a 20, I think it's 22 pages. It might be more. to maintain all of that, to do it and do it with quality. Something always gets sacrificed. And so when you're thinking about your business, and we'll have different conversations a little bit later to talk about where your revenue comes from, what are the sources, what are the type of services that you offer. When you really sit with, some of them are complementary, and sometimes you're offering something totally out of left field. This is common in the consulting world when you don't have a niche and you throw bid for everything, you sometimes don't get anything. And you're like, I'm doing a hodgepodge of stuff. And now you're not in a singular place where you can produce consistent content or offer the same type of service or have some kind of strategy. So while we encourage revenue diversification, the Cheesecake Factory example is a great example of doing too much can actually hurt you. And I think riches are in the niches. I'm going to mess this up. Whatever that phrase is, but there's truly magic to, I only work with certain type of buyers at a certain level in their journey. I only sell certain type of properties because then I can say I've done 100 of these and here's why this strategy works. Here's why this method works. It builds credibility. You hone in on your craft. And I honestly think it's a little bit more exciting once you find where that niche is. And so this is just one of those examples of, don't try to be the Cheesecake Factory. You absolutely can if you have the bandwidth and the scale. But when you're thinking about diversification, be strategic in what are those complementary additions to what you already do. And that way you can maintain quality, because having quantity is great. But when you're a quality provider, people start coming to you of, this person is really good at this. That's who you go to. People don't have to think about, here's 5 friends. It's no, this friend is really good at this business. This is their service. This is their offering. And that's just a very strategic, thoughtful way as you guys think about revenue diversification. But on the flip side, Reggie will share a different example on how to come back from things.
Thank you, Mina. And so, what we have in terms of the top industries represented in the audience today are folks from consulting, technology, and wellness. And we have a number of folks who receive their revenue from contracts, customers, and clients, which were those top answers. And when we think about our customers and our clients, a great example, another large business that's also in the food industry that we can talk about is Red Lobster. So Red Lobster was on the brink of bankruptcy and had really had a lot of economic downturn in the market. And Red Lobster reminds us that there's really no business that's too big to fail. So when we think about how they were able to really come back, it came from a couple of different things, right? It came from strategic pivots to the menu. So they had to focus on streamlining their options and making sure that they had enough that they could replicate at scale in a way that also enticed customers to come out and take advantage of some happy hour specials, take advantage of some of these different programs that they had on different days of the week so that they could really meet the needs and make sure that people want to come back and have that good sit down experience. You know, after the pandemic, we've experienced a time where social connection is increasingly in demand, and folks, you know, maybe don't sit around the dinner table as much as they used to, but being able to go out and have a nice experience, to enjoy some food, beverages, and to also have, you know, we love Red Lobster and their cheddar biscuits, but thinking about opportunities to really sustain and grow that work looks like Red Lobster needing to really pivot how they addressed not only their menu, but also their pricing. And it also came really down to being customer centric, which you see here as the second bullet over here. So listening and taking a real swath of what customers were looking for in terms of sauces, in terms of items on the menu, in terms of their beverage menu, so that that way they could make sure that as they were pulling these triggers and these levers to really improve their business model, that they had what they needed to be successful in doing that, and that they could be really rigorous around closing those feedback loops. But which gets down here to this third one, you know. So as we think about systematic collection and performance analysis, so looking at your data. Right. So looking at your sales, if you do customer surveys, if you do testimonial requests, getting that feedback from customers so that you can get their insights from them directly, that you can ask them if you could feature those things to help potentially attract new customers and clients, asking for referrals to clients from folks who can actually validate that they've had a good experience with you, with your business. So let's say you're a technology consulting company and you work on process improvements for IT information technology, asking folks that you've worked with if they would refer you to other folks can be a great way while closing those feedback loops to get your next sale. And then also keep an experiential and experimental mindset. So as we think about experiences as a whole, much like going to the movie theaters, much like going to Red Lobster, having the opportunity to experiment and try new things, try something that you might not have seen initially as an option for you to really explore and do well with your business. You have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to learn and to continue closing those feedback loops with your customers, so that as you're working to bring new things to market, you might not have to go down this whole road where you've spent a lot on something that doesn't actually net you a return. So you just want to, as the kind of four highlights from these rebounds with Red Lobster, thinking about innovation in terms of your sales. You want to make sure that you are mission driven and focused around how you're like, making sure that you're serving your customers where they need to be met so that you can keep them coming back. You want to make sure that you're lean and agile, meaning that you are fast in terms of your operational agility, meaning that you can move quickly and scale things as needed, scale forward and scale back after you've gotten some real learning lessons, and make sure that customer relevance is how you're focusing on your market, particularly in product and service-based businesses. As we think about these businesses, we need to make sure that we are continuing to meet the needs of our customers. And if we can't do that, we fail to be relevant. And when we're failing to be relevant, we fail to exist in the market. And most small businesses don't survive the first 2 to 5 years of business. And we're really working to make sure that business owners have what they need to be successful so that we can overcome those gaps and sustain legacy in our communities for the long haul. All right. So, this is a moment for everyone. If you have some paper or pen, if you jot notes down on an iPad, you can think about this. But we wanted to take some time to really present what revenue mapping looks like as a whole. So, thinking about your revenue landscape, right? So, thinking about where your money comes from on a day-to-day basis. How and where are you getting your funds from? So, we have a couple of sources here that might work for most of the businesses on the call. If you have others that fit outside of these buckets, you can feel free to also write them down as well. But we suggest just writing them down on a piece of paper to know where, and if you don't want to think about percentages, just think about the bulk of where your revenue may come from. So are you getting income from grants and contracts? So you might be a supplier for the city of Boston or with the state. Are you getting those types of contracted services? Are you selling directly on a B2B basis or a business to business or a business to consumer basis where you have, like Mina's example of the convenience store? Are you selling goods and services? Like the example with Epiphany Hair Care Studio, are you actually selling services to clients directly through earned revenue? Are you someone who has tapped into some of the supplier ecosystems where you might be working through some of the supplier diversity and inclusion programs, and you're tapped in to work with larger organizations and municipal partners in that effort? Or do you have some other types of subscriptions, retainer agreements, or licensing models or memberships that allow you to keep folks in the fold and keep them paying while you're also providing them a service or providing them insights? A real example of that is how a lot of creators and creatorpreneurs now in the market have paid newsletters where you can subscribe and get varied access to different tiers of information and insights and resources, according to what tier of membership that you're a part of. So we're going to give folks, it's 12:26, we're going to give folks 2 to 3 minutes just to jot that down. And then thinking about those percentages, which percentages come from each area? one thing that we hope that as folks are doing this exercise is that as you're thinking about where your revenue is mapped currently, you could also start to come up with some ideas around where you'd like your revenue to grow towards in the coming, let's say, 12 to 18 months. So, this current economic climate is really one where we have a lot of things changing and happening on a day-to-day basis, which can make forecasting out, 3, 5, 10 years a little challenging. But even as you're just thinking about where your current money is coming from, thinking about your revenue in the next 12 to 18 months to see like what things might look like for you by the end of 2026, start of 2027, and where you'd like things to go. We'll give it 30 more seconds and then we'll move on.
Awesome. I feel like that was 30-ish seconds. We also realize that when you're thinking about revenue, you probably have to dig a little bit deeper because where you think it comes from, where it actually comes from may not be the same. And what I mean by that is I grew up in the food business, so we're going to go ahead and use those examples of, I think a lot of money is coming from us partnering with Uber versus DoorDash versus this. And the second part of that analysis, as you look at where your revenue is coming from, is are you equally investing in those sources? So you might be putting a lot of ads and advertisement that is driving you zero, right? If you're putting ads and advertising money out there, strategically thinking Facebook is a great place, or a lot of people for XYZ business are on Instagram, is your business coming from there? Tying those, it sounds very obvious, but I'll use myself as an example as an agent is I can put out ads, I can show up to events, I can sponsor things. But where do I actually get my clients from? Where do I find people that are willing to transact in real estate? Am I putting myself in the right environment? Am I showing up the way that I want to get the right type of client? Because not everybody is always your client. Again, honing in, having niches, focusing on strategy. So the other side of mapping your revenue is thinking about the ops of how do I grow this? You need to know where it comes from. You have to look at your data and piece the two together. You can enlist friends. We have ChatGPT where you can put a lot of this stuff in to help you read and analyze. You have folks like us that do this for a living to say, I make 100K, 20K from this, 10 comes from this, there's walk-in revenue, and you can break it down in buckets. It's definitely an effort, but go back 90 days. Don't even go back so far where it's overwhelming, but look at your last 90 days and think about where it came from. What did I spend in the last 90 days to make this $100,000? And then kind of map things of does A match with A, does B match with B? And I think those are very thoughtful decisions. When you think about, I want to grow my revenue, I want to be $1 million business, I want to be a $500,000 business, I want to make six figures, wherever you're at in your journey. Um, Aligning those things and taking that pause and assessment. And this is definitely that quarter where everybody is like, this is the lock-in period to set up your year. In real estate, it is the if you do Q4 correctly, you're set yourself up for the next year. In years that I have done it well, it's been a great year. In years that I didn't lock in before the start of the year, it didn't go so well. And so this is a very timely thing for you and for me, something that I'm doing actively as well, where technology plays in. And I'll jump into the next slide is actually different, but there is a whole slide on where I'll talk about expenses, which is the flip side of this. But think about things with strategic with intent, because what you'll find when you do this deeper dive is you're spending money on things you don't use, you don't need, you might have duplicates. In preparation for this workshop, actually, Reggie showed me a very cool visual. I don't know if he has it handy, where he just mapped out everything that he was paying for as a service as a business owner that provides strategy consulting, has multiple team members that does this kind of work. And you'll have something for e-signature, you'll have something for document reading, you have Gamma for presentations. And with AI spitting a new cute tool every 30 seconds, it's so easy to add up 5, 10, 15, $20 here that at one point you're like, oh, I didn't know I was paying for it. I learned that I'm paying for things sometimes when Google sends me a nice email and says you've been charged $6.99 on your Amex. So don't be that. Do those analyses, align your expenses to your revenue, And if it's not there, cut something out for a quarter, go back and resubscribe. But it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day of doing the job, doing the business, getting through that sometimes we forget to pause. And when you're thinking about growth, when you're thinking about scaling, if you don't look at those things before you start growing, you might get to $1 million. But if you're also spending $800,000 to get that $1 million, you work twice as hard for not as much money. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to that slide in a second. But to think about your strategy aligning with your revenue, obviously continuous improvement is part of the process, but there is a very powerful thing about stopping and slowing down before you start running again. And I'll pause there.
No, 100%. And no, and thank you for that, Mina. And as we think about, and folks might not have heard the term revenue operations before, but revenue operations is literally just three buckets of work that we focus on at Oak Lane. We focus on marketing, we focus on sales, and we focus on customer success. So how we're thinking about how your dollars are tying into, as Mina said, where are you spending on advertising and marketing and brand partnerships and promotions? Where are you actually selling and how is your sales performing? And then, as we also mentioned, in terms of being data driven, closing the feedback loops around what's working well, which is often it can be challenging in certain business models, like in consulting, right? Where it's like if you make a set of recommendations and you have clients that do or don't adhere to them, the solutions that you're working to help them scale through also need to be accounted for in the context of the application. But by addressing what worked well, where the pivots came in, and being able to build forward from that new foundation and from that next step, you have an opportunity to not only help your clients really optimize their process, but also take that learning for your business imperatives as well, so that you can carry those things forward. And what we want to do, again, to Mina's point, is work smarter, not harder, all 2025 and tomorrow, and now that we're moving into 2026, thinking about we've heard a lot, AI is here, it's not going anywhere. We've heard about AI taking jobs. AI is not replacing jobs in the market. People who don't know how to adapt and to use these technologies and these systems to improve their processes will have a harder time keeping up in the market, but the work will be there. And the work may shift, but as long as we are also learning and keeping up with the demand and also staying hard fast on how we're continuously improving as individuals and as business owners, we can be successful in the market. All right. So, in terms of recurring revenue models, Mina?
Yes. So just other ideas as you think about this. Ways to get creative. There's such small, different plugs. Cafe Nero was a great example as we were thinking about this, right? It doesn't mean that I'm gonna, for me, it's every time I open that middle part in my car, whatever that's called. I have about 7 Cafe Nero cards. I don't live near one anymore, but I used to go all the time. You get one stamped, you do it. And it always gives that little plug because I'm not throwing it away every time I clean my car. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go back and get that last stamp so I can get my ninth free coffee. Yeah, it is 9 coffees. And you keep that, right? But those are such small reminders that people keep and hold. And I know I'm not the exception. I know it sounds really weird, but I know somebody else does this, right? But those are little things that you can do in your business if it is oriented to people walking into your space. And when it comes to service, are you connecting with them? Are you reaching out with them? Retainer agreements are in the consulting world very popular of you set people up, you set up their systems with AI, tech, everything. There's a lot of I'm going to do it myself, which is great. But a lot of times DIY turns into DI nothing. And so sometimes it's okay to invest in having someone like us or anybody else, right, that has experience in for your business. Here's the 4 or 2 tools that you should implement to make your life easier. It may not be your marketing strategy, it may not be your exposure, but if it cuts out 3 hours of admin every day or every week, that is worth something. That is your time freeing up, right? And there's enough technology in the world that exists today to make something in your business better. I don't think there's any business that is AI or technology proof. Those are 2 entirely different things. Technology always existed. AI just learns from us and helps us if you look at it that way. And so we encourage you to think about how can I stay on people's radar? I do this in consulting. I do this in as an agent of staying relevant, of staying top of mind with value. And so those are just a couple of examples of like very small things. One was related to the consulting space, which is for some of you guys. And then for any type of walk-in business or service thing, a punch card, a digital way of keeping in touch of thank you for stopping by 4 times this year. For your fifth, here's 20% off, right? But you have to be investing in collecting that data to be able to use it to your advantage. If you look at all of the big companies, the way that we'll talk about something and something will target us is because they're learning from our behavior. And there's no reason that a small, mid, or just anything between us and Meta can't do the same thing. We just have to be strategic about, hey, that I can absolutely do that too. And so we encourage you to explore those things and technologies so that you're not left behind because to Reggie's point, AI isn't going to replace us, but it's going to replace us with people who know how to use it better. And it's not that hard. Like I'm teaching my dad things in his business, and my mom is like, "Well, I'm just talking to AI about like this recipe," and I was like, "Mom, Google it. It's bad for the planet." But even she's like, "Well, no, we're revolutionizing this thing with like my spices and flavors, and like you can integrate it in day to day, but like use it for business, and start experimenting with it so it doesn't feel so intimidating." Reggie, did I miss anything or anything you want to add on this particular piece before we hop into expenses?
I'm muted.
You're muted. Okay.
We have a couple of questions that we can answer related to this. So, can you discuss when it's appropriate to retain IP rights when it comes to licensing models for your business? So, we have to give a disclaimer: we are not attorneys nor tax professionals. So, this advice and these recommendations are ones that you definitely need to connect with the powers that be that have those certifications and education to do so. But I think there's never a wrong time to ask an attorney and also check with some of these different programs like Boston College has a free legal clinic where you can get access to students who are in their third year, their 3Ls, that can work with you under the supervision of a licensed attorney. That's actually some support that we received at Oak Lane, which was really helpful in terms of some of our contact generation to get a sense of where things stand with your intellectual property. Suffolk I'm sorry, BC has their free legal clinic, and then Suffolk has an intellectual property law clinic as well. So there are a lot of university and ecosystem partners that provide that type of support. Where if you're looking around how to license out your IP and how to build that out, they can provide you the tools and the frameworks to do that. And I think if you're thinking about launching something, a new product or a service, and you want to trademark and eventually copyright something and to have that protection of your value that you're bringing to the market, you should definitely consult with an attorney as soon as possible so that you have a good sense and framework of how to grow with that intellectual property over time. And Jessica's question is also similar in terms of when you should invest as a legal team, specifically as a solopreneur. And that's a really great question because, as entrepreneurs, things can often feel like an island. We're juggling all of the different hats. You're doing, I don't know if anyone has seen those memes on Instagram where you're having a staff meeting and it's a bunch of pictures of you where I'm talking to the chief revenue officer and the CEO and the growth officer and the accountant and the legal officer. You should always seek out the support. The city of Boston has a technical assistance program as well, where they provide access to legal services for different entrepreneurs. Oak Lane has benefited from it as well as being a technical assistance provider with the city of Boston. And it's been helpful just to be able to phone a friend when you have a question. If you're thinking about protections for your business, if you're thinking about intellectual property, if you're thinking about hiring folks, you want to make sure that you're doing so within compliance with state and federal law so that you don't get those surprise bills or a surprise notice that, can often stress you out and say, hey, what's actually happening? You want to make sure that you solicit that support early and often. And there are a number of free resources that they have as well, just to help you conceptualize and think about that we can share out with folks after the webinar as well, so that you have a starting point.
And then the other thing I'll just say on that is I'm working on something that made me ask that question. There's incubators, there's cohorts, there's community created for people that are creating product that are in that IP space of when to do it because these are not cheap things. But joining programs, communities where like those resources are part of the relationships you're building is also a little bit more cost effective because sometimes you don't want to outright get an attorney. Are they the right attorney for the type of IP that I have for what I want to license for what I want to do? So I encourage you to find within your area, which to my surprise in Massachusetts, we have a lot, not that I'm surprised. But when I started looking for my particular thing, it was actually very nice to be able to join some communities where you can talk about things, learning what an NDA is, when to do it, who to do it with. I encourage it sooner than later, but join communities where those resources and the right resources are there for you in a timely manner. Because there's nothing quite like hiring the wrong attorney because they're not cheap. Can't say I've been there. I have enough attorney friends, but I know they're very expensive when you go to the wrong one and they give you advice that is generic. A lot of things that are happening in the world right now, the more specific you are, the niche attorneys for your thing, they will give you the best advice because they're seeing this in their day to day and they're not just giving you something that honestly ChatGPT could have. So just wanted to throw my 2 cents there.
And two things with that also too. In terms of memberships, one of the most interesting memberships that I've seen, which is such an easy one, is the car wash memberships, where folks, you pay $25 a month to get car washes, but as someone who what weather's like in New England, if you're not getting the car wash, they're still cashing your check. So thinking about how to take advantage of where folks are buying in and opting in, they have an option to have as much of the service that they'd want is something that can be really helpful. And in terms of also connecting and networking with other folks as a part of the chamber and a part of these other ecosystems, we've received cold calls and emails from agency partners looking to connect with other small business owners. So also check out the roster of businesses that are listed as a part of the chamber's network. If you're a part of programs like the Associated Industries of Massachusetts or BECMA, really, there are a lot of free and open resources to help you plug into the right spaces for you to have those discovery calls, those exploratory conversations to help you build out the networks that you need to really address your growth challenges as entrepreneurs. All right.
Okay. Um, So we talked a lot about revenue, a lot about diversifying revenue, a lot about not going crazy with the diversification of your revenue. But one of the things that I don't think we talk about enough, and I'm going to shout my parents out for this, that I learned as they did their business and something that we were taught, and I get to share with you guys, and something I do annually is, for example, to make $150,000, I spent 30K in fees, in marketing, in licensing, in this, right? If I want to get to that next level of 250 or 300, those expenses grow in parallel. And when you're not watching and you're not paying attention to what you're subscribing to, they sometimes grow faster. This principle actually also applies in life. People sometimes, I don't know what the right word for it is, but the more you make, the more you spend. Don't let that be you, because to grow efficiently, effectively, the key thing in my mind, at least how I operate in business, isn't making a X amount of revenue. For me, it's net profit. Like if I can put the same amount of effort and make an extra $30,000 without really doing more, I'm going to figure out how to get there before I figure out how to double my income. Because you can double your income, you probably doubled your time, you probably doubled your expenses. In the end, did you net about the same? Because you definitely lost life hours, you probably were more stressed. And so as we think about revenue and sources, we talked about mapping if those revenue sources are bringing in, like, are we investing appropriately, right? Should I put more money in Instagram because I get most of my clients there? Show up strategically. Thinking about your expenses, being mindful of that, cutting things that aren't necessary, even if it's for a quarter. Do I really need this? Can I use something smarter? Can I combine services? There's so many different tech stacks that are available that can be very overwhelming. But you can be so specific about this is my business, this is my problem. These are all the things I currently use. Is there presently anything, and how do I implement it? You can do it yourself. You can hire someone to do it for you faster, more efficiently. But when you think about cutting your revenue, now you've put a system in place. Now it's not you chasing an invoice. Now it's not you doing this manually. You've set up a process that can now be scaled. And it goes back to the principle of slow down before you can run. And so, like, when we think about growth, when I think about doubling my income, when I think about where my time is going, when I catch myself doing these things and I'm like, can somebody else do this? Now the conversation is, can a piece of technology do this and can someone else manage it, right? It's twofold. But if you don't ever look at it that way, you will be outpaced with people who are. Because that is literally one of the pieces of consulting that I offer is how do you optimize your time? How do you optimize your money? And so if I have a $500 budget to clean up my admin, yes, you can hire a person. You can also hire a person to maintain a system so that if that person quits, you still have the system. And I'm using my hands, which I don't know if you can see. But there was a whole train process that happened here as I explained it. Let me pause there to Reggie to see if you have any thoughts or anything that I missed. But it's so, so, so important to do. And I'm gonna encourage Reggie to find his graphic of like all the things that you spend money on, that you invest in on a quarterly basis. Look at every piece of dollar that came into your business. Does it match? Does it make sense? You can reach out to one of us to talk about, does it align? How do I better align? How am I being strategic? Because you will find yourself in scenarios of, I didn't even know I was paying for that. Rocket Money is a really fun tool that'll tell you stuff that you don't use. But it's so much deeper than that in a business because you're so focused on executing for your clients, for providing good service, for doing quality work that you sometimes forget to like health check where your expenses are and where things are going. And that's such a big part of growth, of strategic growth, because otherwise you'll grow and you won't necessarily make more. I don't know, I hope that point hits. But Reggie, anything I can do to further clarify or make sure that that hits? I don't care about being $1 million business. If I just doubled the number between my revenue and my expenses, I'm good. Like, it's a great stat. Um, but I've tried it in years in my own business of I didn't do more, I just did less and still made more. And like it changes your entire way of existing because then you start applying that principle to your life of what am I wasting money on? Do we all need to pay for Netflix? Netflix didn't hear this. Right? Those little things of technology and thing, you'd be surprised how much money you spend and you don't have to. So be smart about your money.
No, no, I love that, Mina. And I'm definitely all for sharing is caring. And as we think about strategic partnerships and how we can really grow to scale, this first iteration of what Oak Lane looked like started out with me as a solopreneur working individually. And one of the things that I said to myself is that if we really want to grow and scale, we have to be able to work well and serve the folks that we serve well while also partnering with the folks in a crowded market who do other things that are complementary in a way that we can work together to work smarter, not harder. So, like between these conversations that Mina and I have had around revenue strategy and operations, they don't come to folks naturally. And one of the things that we say is that often, folks hire us thinking that they need to get their dishwasher fixed, but they actually don't realize that they have a plumbing problem. A lot of the things that we're talking about here are plumbing issues. If your systems aren't connected to a strategy, they're not connected to the tech that you need to run it well, and then you're not actually capturing and telling that story well, you're not going to get your eyes, you're not going to have the right eyes on who needs to have the eyes on your business, your product, your services, or your goods in a time frame where they can quickly make a decision and know that this is for them. You want to think about how your value proposition, the ways in which you're putting yourself out there, are also aligned with their needs. So talking about it from a customer centric perspective, so if we're talking about hair care products, if we're talking about green juice, if we're talking about sunscreen, it's all about what is working or what the challenge that you're solving for your customer needs to look like, and how you're tying your profits to rigorously evaluating where your products are or your services are helping them solve those problems the most efficiently, the most succinctly, in the shortest amount of time, in the most transformative way. And to Mina's point, everything isn't for everybody. Not every client needs to be the client that works for you. We've had clients that we've recommended, this might not be the best for you and your engagement, and that's okay. But you learn that as a part of really evaluating and have that discovery call. And you know that if it doesn't make sense for you, you can walk away and say, we'd love to stay in touch. And if there are any folks in your network that you'd like to refer us to, we'd be happy to schedule a call. It's always about the Wanda Mac from the game, always be closing the ABCs. You always want to be closing and closing the loop with folks and staying in touch. So that way, that when it's time for someone to think about Mina for a revenue strategy consult, they know who to call. If they want to think about a strategic marketing campaign, they know to hit up Reggie at Oak Lane. And we're really living these values in practice and being iterative about it for ourselves because we know that we also want to have longevity in our businesses. To be able to do that, we have to stay relevant to what's happening in terms of the market.
Yeah. I love that. We do have a question. I'll read it and then we'll both opine on it. I've often heard the phrase you have to spend money to make money, especially when it comes to taking out bank loans, but the idea of being in debt has always intimidated me. As a business owner, how can you tell when taking on debt is essential for growth, particularly when it's part of strategy to diversify your revenue streams? So I'll take a small stab at it and then I'll let Reggie go. One, getting a business loan is actually really hard. I have some friends that do this. If anyone needs a referral to Eastern Bank or some of the other ones, they do this for a living. They ask a lot of questions. They look at your strategy, they look at your vision, they look at your growth, they look at your history, how long you've been around. Um, I'll start with saying change your mindset. You're investing in your business, you're not taking on debt. It's not a loan. They're not giving you money because they're just giving you money. They're investing in your business And I implore you to change your mindset to feel the same. That'll change how you view it. And then the other thing is, I think before you go to this, the amount of preparedness you have to do will force you to do some of the things that we're talking about is look at your expenses, trim that down, look at your revenue, know where it's coming from. Hey, 90% revenue comes here, therefore 90% of my marketing dollars are going here. When you have that level of understanding of your business, I promise you, even if your business is like sum zero and you're just breaking even, you are more qualified or will be better I don't want to use entertained, but like better received to any banker that is considering giving you a loan than someone who is like, I don't know. And there's a lot of people who don't know because these are very difficult things to look into to figure out. And it's a lot of like being honest with yourself of like, I'm not where I need to be, but I have to have this difficult conversation to get there. So I can't answer your question on when's the right time, but I think as you do some of these things, and we're happy to share the presentation with you, of look at your revenue, look at your expenses, match those things. Where do you think it should be coming from? Like we're also consumers. How would I spend on something like this? Right? And you're not always your customer. Like I learned that with some lady that made cakes on Instagram, and she was like, "You're not always your customer, so don't limit yourself." But as you do those and have those conversations, you'll have a clearer picture and you'll have a strategy. Talk to a banker. Here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm doing. No one's going to turn down a conversation because everybody wants your business. They want the opportunity to invest in what you're building. And you going to them in a much more prepared state will make you more qualified. And they'll give you resources. If it's not them, I've never met a banker that isn't like, but you could go here. And they'll help you grow enough so you can come back. I'll pause there of how to prepare for this conversation. There isn't a wrong time, but you have to be prepared enough to take that investment to then grow it. It's not debt. Debt is so good for you. Okay, stop. Oh, the realtor in me will come out, and I don't think you guys need that today. I'm so sorry.
I'm like, mortgage is
I'm
a good
like,
bet, like for the right property for the right opportunity.
yes, yes, good debt is great debt, just not credit card debt. I don't condone that. Okay, I'll go on mute.
No, thank you, Mina. And as someone who's done work in small business lending, I know that there are a number of different programs that support entrepreneurs of all stages. If you want to, in addition to talking to the banks, as Mina mentioned, you could also look at some of the community development corporations, and there are these programs called Community Development Finance Institutions, CDFIs, which have a different type of capital. Some come work through the SBA, others work through the United States Treasury, and have access to giving entrepreneurs lower interest rate loans than some of the other market rate solutions, where it can be that initial startup capital that you need to be successful. In terms of diversifying the revenue stream and thinking about the debt being essential for growth, it depends on your model. Knowing that let's say let's say that you sell clothing, so you sell apparel. If you know that you need to produce 300 hoodies and hats and t-shirts per month, can you cover that expense based off of your sales? It gets back to Mina's equation here, where profit being revenue minus expenses. How is the capital going to help you grow? And then as you're showing that to the lender, to the bank, to a grant evaluator, let's say if you wanted to apply for some funds that might be non-dilutive capital, which is basically just saying grants as an opportunity to get some money that you don't necessarily have to pay back, but you do have to report for tax purposes. You can start to get a picture of what you actually need to do with the money and how that investment, that good debt that you'll take to then multiply your business efforts, can support you in getting to the next stage. So it's a numbers game, and it's definitely, we're playing chess, not checkers in the market. So as we're thinking about how to play chess with it, you need to know how to move the pieces, and where taking on this initial additional payment that you might have to pay out of pocket per month out of your business expenses is something that you can handle so that you can move forward to that next chapter. All right, looking at time, we're almost done, and we want to be respectful of time. Okay. All right, so supplier ecosystem opportunities. And folks, feel free to keep asking questions. It's been great to answer these questions live. So why this matters? So there are a lot of supplier diversity and inclusion efforts that we've seen in the market through programs like the Greater New England Minority Supplier Diversity Council, BECMA's programming, the Chamber of Commerce's Pacesetters program. There are a number of different initiatives that are helping to support underutilized revenue opportunities for mission-driven businesses and entrepreneurs. And the real plug is that often there are state and federal mandates around doing certain amounts of contracts with diverse business owners. That means minority and women business-owned enterprises, LGBTQIA plus owned enterprises, veteran-owned enterprises, disabled-owned enterprises. So depending on how you certify and how you identify and how you lean into your identity, your story, your superpower, those are opportunities for you to potentially get contract dollars. Procurement is really, as you can see here, procurement that values unique perspectives and capabilities of diverse suppliers is what we're looking to bring to the market. There are a number of different programs that are also recognized across different partners. So, for example, if you're a certified business with the city of Boston, the state supplier diversity program will recognize that you are connected through the city's program and you could have access to potential opportunities through that program. As you're looking at opportunities here, so just with these three at the bottom, the Minority Women Business Owned certification is one. You could think about organizations like the Chamber and partnership opportunities, like what we're doing here to bring this workshop to you, to think about, providing networking and business development opportunities to folks based off of your business model. Thinking about the holiday season, let's say you do a holiday pop-up, you want to give a discount code to the chamber as a part of being a member. Maybe that's something that you could explore. Thinking innovatively about how you can approach your revenue stack and how you can get in front of where you need to be from an audience perspective is really crucial. And then these corporate rosters. So corporations have a number of different supplier inclusion efforts where you can go on to a website and register as a vendor. So that way, if let's say you're an event planner and you'd like to plan a large scale event with a large corporation, you could be registered in that effort, or you have an opportunity to do something else in terms of the other procurement opportunities at play. And then lastly, so this is just for us wrapping up. So reflecting on what you've heard here today, what's one specific revenue that you'll make and test in the next 30 days? So you can drop it in the chat. Thinking about thinking about the things that you've heard, what can you translate into something actionable that you can leave from this workshop and immediately do? Can you map out your revenue? Can you reach out to a bank partner to see about their credit, their lines of credit, their loan programs? Can you reach out to the chamber and see what opportunities there are for you to potentially do some things with them in the coming weeks and months? Thinking about that, just drop it in the chat or in the Q&A box when you have a second, and then we will close out. And as folks are doing that, so just remember that there are three key things that you want to do as you're thinking about this revenue experiment. So one, you want to track it, right? If you're not tracking it, is it really happening? You need to make sure that you're actually seeing your progress towards it. You want to measure that impact. So defining a success metric. So what does success look like for you in this effort? How will it help you scale towards revenue in the market? And then lastly, it's iterative, right? So think about how you can repeat it. So a quarter of the year is just 90 days. That's three 30-day segments. So what can you do in the 30, in the 60, and in the 90-day window to be successful with your revenue experiment and how you can continue to grow and scale your business and take revenue operations as something that you feel comfortable and really proud of owning for your business as a small business owner and carrying that work forward. And then lastly, thank y'all. So we're really excited and proud to have had the chance to have spent the day with you. We'd love to stay in touch. If you'd like to connect with me or myself on social media, here are our LinkedIn accounts below, and they can also be dropped in the chat, and we'll be making sure to send follow-up information. And we're, again, really grateful to Amber Kaja, the Greater Boston Chambers Commerce Foundation team, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts for making this available and for having us today. And we're excited to continue supporting everyone on your journeys.
Thank you so much, Reggie and Mina. This presentation was awesome. I wish we had another 30 minutes because I have so many questions myself. Thank you, everyone who joined the call today. I know we're at time. I just wanted to plug, we will have another session in January with Oak Lane in person to go more in depth about looking at your revenue streams and sources. Please be on the lookout for an email for that. We also have more webinars coming up within the next month. We will email those opportunities to you, but if you're ever looking to learn more about how the Chamber Foundation supports small businesses, please go to gbccfoundation.org. Thank you again to Oak Lane, and thank you again to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts for your support today. I hope you all enjoy your afternoon and that we see you soon.